Hi there, and welcome to Athelstan Founder. This is going to be a very short or comparatively shorter review video. So I'm going to start doing these review videos now. And this one will reference who the first King of England was. So this is a review video from History Hit, which is a very popular history YouTube channel. I believe it's run by Dan Snow, who those from Britain would know that he's obviously a noted TV-based historian, and he is the son of Peter Snow, who again, those who would know, did the statistics for British elections for a long time during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So without further ado, then I'm going to just have a brief overview of the first few minutes of this video.
Who was the first King of England? It sounds like a simple question, right? But who was it?
To say the first King of England, it must Richard II.
We know there's been a king of these fair shores for about...
Now, obviously that guy probably wasn't very schooled in history, but Richard II can't have been the first, so that's... You know what? They should have added that because it just embarrassed him, but whatever. But no, it couldn't have been Richard II.
1,000 years. But who was the very first guy to put a crown on his head and say, "This land here, England, I'm king of it"?
Oh, I don't know.
That's what we're going to find out today. So I'm taking to the streets to test people's royal knowledge and see if they can help us figure out who that very official first King of England truly was. Pigeon doesn't want to talk. All right, we're starting with the big question. Who was the first King of England?
King George.
You obviously had no clue. I don't even think he's British, so I think he's American or somewhere from North America at least.
I want to say...
I wouldn't be able to tell you. I mean, I could take a guess at some common royal names, but...
Nope. Thinking... No.
I'm thinking about all the names that English names. George.
No, definitely not George.
Something.
A George, a Charles, a Louis, something along those lines.
Okay.
Louis. If you want to get kind of technical, King John, before he died and after Magna Carta was signed, Louis was kind of a fill-in, who the nobles had asked to come to be king. At the time, he was a Dauphin, which was like the heir to the French throne, so kind of like the Prince of Wales, or the equivalent of the Prince of Wales, but that's the closest England or Britain, or what was to become Britain has ever come to having a King Louis.
I've got 1066 in my head, but that's not right.
You're talking like Alfred.
You know, he's correct. 1066. William the Conqueror was not the first King of England. Yes, the Norman conquest was a pivotal moment. You have to accept that. But first King of England, no chance.
Anglo-Saxon, or are you talking about Normans?
Philip.
You know what? He's on the right track.
I'm just thinking about all the English names that I know.
Philip John Thompson. Yeah, no.
Not the first one, not the first one.
See, I'm going to say William the Conqueror, but I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong.
You're wrong, madam.
Alfred, I can think of one, or if you think...
Alfred the Great's a shout, but no, I wouldn't say so.
Thinking of Norman the Conqueror, that's another.
Norman the Conqueror, well, William the Conqueror, no, he's not. Yes, an important figure, one can't dispute that, but first king, no chance.
You had Knut, he was Danish.
Ooh, You know what? This geezer knows his stuff. Or at least he has some grounding. Canute the Great's interesting, but I won't say he's the first king. Though obviously, yeah, in his own right was. You know what? There are a lot of people in history who've been called the Great. I think Canute is one of the people who justifies that label. You have to say in his reign in what the early to mid 11th century, he was one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. So he probably does warrant the labels the Great.
From what I can remember as well.
I know there's some old kings, medieval kings. I've heard of like Harold, and I've heard of, I think, Alfred the Great.
Well, Harold Godwinson, no, wasn't the first king. And yeah, already discussed King Alfred the Great.
Well, it depends if you mean like a united England or not. Like England, I would say Alfred the Great, maybe. I guess England as we understand it now, maybe William the Conqueror.
Alfred the Great.
What can you tell me about Alfred the Great?
So he was originally King of Wessex.
That's true.
I think when it was originally Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, and I think he became the first king of all of England.
No, that's not true.
You mentioned a couple of early. You said there's some earlier names.
Yeah.
Are there any that you could offer up?
Like really old like monastic names. Athelstan or
You hit the nail on the head there.
something. I don't know the full like the actual name, but someone got Athelstan.
Athelstan.
Wow, he's correct. They did him dirty by saying Richard II, but he actually hit the nail on the head again.
Yeah, I think King Arthur could be real.
Can you tell me anything else about him? Like what kind of king was he?
No clue.
If we were
No, King Arthur didn't exist.
to talk about medieval times, obviously very different to today, how do you reckon someone became king then?
Oh, probably killed someone.
Well, you're born into it, right? So based on your family and your family's legacy as well.
Yeah, she's correct. Monarchy then and now, obviously, and throughout much of the world, monarchy has always been hereditary based on bloodlines, and our family has a right to rule because of some past great event, or we're descended from some god or some stuff like that.
Probably through conquest, I guess, and by
Again, she's right again. Conquest.
conquering neighbouring kingdoms or units of land.
Probably a quite a lengthy battle of people fighting in a field that would then result in some sort of king being.
Again, he's right in that. Yeah, I suppose that lends to the lady's point about conquest, which I suppose is true.
Announced, or some sort of foreign country that would come over.
How would you do it? If you found yourself back there and you're like, that's the top spot, I want to become king, what would you do?
I mean, I guess you got to be able to swing a sword really good.
And how are your sword skills?
Not very good. I don't think I've ever swung a sword, but we do other things.
How do you become king of England?
Well, I would probably have to kill off my brother, as he's a man and a threat to me inheriting.
So how powerful do you think?
In medieval times, off the top of my head, I can think of. I can't think. I was going to say I can't think of anybody who did that. Per the records, no. That there is some suspicion that Henry I had some kind of hand in the death of his brother, King William Rufus. So it could just as well have been a hunting accident. I suppose we'll never know the truth.
These like medieval, like way back medieval kings were.
I think it was much more of a kind of you were the ruler and government listened to you.
I think they were quite powerful.
I think generally that is true, but medieval kings had to still listen to their barons and their nobles and shit because they had the military resources. There was no standing armies, so yes, the king had a lot of power, the sovereign had a lot of power, but it wasn't unchecked. They still had to bargain and negotiate and at least listen to the concerns of their nobles because they needed them.
Powerful, but maybe not all powerful. There were still some constraints, I think, mainly from their kind of barons and people who could challenge them. There were still some constraints to their power.
Yeah, she's right. That's actually a very good answer. So whilst a lot of these people have answered well, whilst they've said a few incorrect things, as lay people, they've actually been pretty decent as lay people.
Probably not that powerful, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if there was lots of people, like especially like peasants, who didn't even know who the king was necessarily. Like I think that maybe it wasn't so important to them.
What kind of...
That's probably true. I think even today, you see, even in liberal democracies with our freedoms and our rights and our enshrined liberties as such, there are people who are resigned and think, well, doesn't matter. All the parties are the same. So if such heightened apathy could exist in a quote unquote enlightened liberal democracy, then in a feudal system that if you're a peasant, you're tied to land, you have to, yes, you're not a slave, you have some degree of recognized rights. You're not literal physical property, as in the case of most forms of slavery that have existed historically. You still, if you were just tied to your local lord or baron or noble, you were tied to the land. Yes, you had some rights. You probably thought, well, who cares? It doesn't bother me. It doesn't affect my life who the king is or who the sovereign monarch is. So I think that's a very valid point.
king do you think you would be?
I want to be a tyrant. You want to be a tyrant? If I was a medieval king, I feel like eventually that's got to go to your head, right? And you're going to get a bit crazy.
I think again that's a very intelligent point. I'd have to commend her for making that because not every medieval king was a tyrant, but again, it's the old adage: power corrupts absolutely. I think when you have that much power, it is often dependent on the character and morals and personality of the individual. So let's say in an English context, whilst you had some more measured and deliberative and wise monarchs like Alfred the Great, like Athelstan, like who else? Canute. You could say Edward the Confessor had great piety, or Henry the First, or Henry the Second. To some extent, you say a good extent Edward the First Longshanks, Edward the Third. You had kings of excess like King John, Richard the Second. You had kings that were not, well, let's just say, made bad decisions in difficult circumstances, like Ethelred the Unready. You had kings that were more concerned with their own personal glory in battle over running the kingdom, which you can say is the same with Richard the Lionheart. So, yeah, I think you can't say every medieval king was bad or cruel or evil, but you can certainly say that that their capacity to rule was based, yes, partly on circumstance like Ethelred, but I'd say also on their personality like John or Richard II.
Would you want to be a medieval king?
No.
Why not?
I think it's one, they didn't live that long, and two, a lot of them probably had quite a bloody end to their lives. Looking back, you just didn't have all the enjoyment of modern.
You say didn't live that long. I suppose that is true by contemporary standards. I believe Edward the First Longshanks was almost 70 when he died, which for that era would have been a long time. Yes, he was the king, so he would have had excellent, well, I was going to say excellent medical care by the standards of the time, I suppose. Henry III was probably about 60 to 70 when he died. So, Ethelred the Unready was probably about in his late 40s, early 50s when he died. Alfred the Great was about 50 when he died. So he's correct. He didn't live as long on average today as then. Yes, that is true. But I don't think it's true necessarily to say that most medieval kings met a bloody end, or shall we say a violent end. Some did, like Harold Godwinson, Edward the Martyr, Edmund. Who else? There are a few, but most either died of natural causes, whether disease or old age. So Henry III, Edward the First Longshanks, King John died of dysentery, which yes, probably wasn't a pleasant way, or probably isn't a pleasant way to die, but it is by definition a natural cause and not a violent war. You didn't get stabbed to death, or you didn't get hacked up in battle or whatever. Edward the Third. So yeah, obviously Richard the Third died in battle. Ethelred died probably either of old age or illness. Athelstan probably died of natural causes. So Alfred the Great died probably of complications from Crohn's disease. Again, that's possible. That's a possible thing. So it's not true to say in every case that medieval kings always met a violent end, but as it was a more violent time compared to today, I suppose it was always. I suppose it's a plausible thing to think, if that makes sense.
Modern day society, you didn't have planes for a start, you couldn't go on holiday, they couldn't get to lie on a beach in Mallorca drinking San Miguel.
He's being a bit, well, obviously what he's saying is true, but obviously he's being a bit jocular. I suppose, one of the benefits of living in this era of humanity is that, you can travel anywhere in the world within a relatively short period of time, which would have been, in medieval times, they wouldn't have even known that the Americas existed or Australia existed, or at least in Europe, they would have known that. Europeans would have known much of Africa existed. They'd have known China and India existed, but very few Europeans would have visited there at that point. So so it would have been a far more closed world compared to today.
Good. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm very aware it's quite cold, but you did a great job.
Well, look, it's the season of giving, and this Christmas, why not give yourself something meaningful?
So it turns out the question, who was the first king of England, might not be that simple after all. However, from talking to people, I think we've managed to narrow it down to 5 contenders, all vying for the title of the first king of England. And those contenders are William the Conqueror, Canute, Athelstan, Alfred the Great, and King Arthur.
Well, it's Athelstan, obviously, but what I'm going to do is that I'm going to see what the expert or professor says and go over his points.
Now, all we need is some expert knowledge, and for that I'm going to meet Matt Lewis, medieval historian extraordinaire, who's going to help us crown the true victor, or hopefully anyway. Right.
I would say my looking lovingly at Alfred, but that's also directly into the sun. So.
Hi Matt, it's nice to meet you.
Hi Louise, great to see you.
I'm hoping that you today can help me figure out a little bit more about English kings. But why exactly have you brought me here?
I thought we'd meet under the watchful gaze of King Alfred himself.
Oh, brilliant, this is King Alfred.
This statue is actually quite fascinating. So it was believed to be a 19th.
That statue incidentally is in the South Bank. Well, not on the South Bank, but it's in Southwark. It's not in central London. Sorry. It's not in the city of London. Southwark is, I suppose, central London. But yeah, it's not in the city of London. It's in Southwark. And yeah, anyone can go and see it. It's in the public. I believe it's in a public park or square. But I'm going to stop for now. And I will continue in seeing what the professor has to say. I have a strong feeling I'm going to agree with most of his points or the general rationale of his points, but we'll see it in further points. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.